The 5 Kage Summit has progressively become the gauntlet that people throw every monstrous group through in hopes for a good discussion. However, it's always the same boring groups. Other Uchiha, Sani, and groups like that, but none are more interesting than the more niche characters like Han and Roushi, Edo Hashirama Tobirama from the Hiruzen fight, and other teams in this same vein, as you guys not only enjoy me giving ground to characters who had none, and these fights are actually much closer than what you might think when you read the title or look at the thumbnail. However, today, I won't be tackling this alone. I have my good friend, my pal, my buddy, Sage. Y'all know the drill. Say what's up. Drop the structure. Let's go.
Yo, what's up? it's always good to be on here. As usual, cue the Itachi cooking video. You know we're about to cook. That being said, the structure of this video is basically going to be, we're going to put these teams in the same position that Sasuke was in during the 5 Kage Summit. So he's going to have to face off again, or they're going to have to face off against A. A's going to start in V1 as he did before. If they clear A, then they move on to the Sand Shinobi and the squad that shows up to help after the A fight. Then we move on to Mei in the hallway. At that point in time, they're going to get a stamina refill, the same sort of stamina refill that Sasuke got from White Zetsu. So it's not going to fully refill their stamina, but if we think that they're heavily fatigued by then, like Sasuke was, they're going to get some kind of boost. If we think they're doing just fine, then they might be refilled. So we'll go into that later, but you're going to fight Mei in the hallway. They clear that, then they move on to Oniki. They clear Oniki, then they move on to Danzo. I've already said this a couple times, that if they clear that, then, I mean, that kind of implies this is a true gauntlet. If they stop at A, then they don't fight the rest of them. If they stop at Oniki, they don't fight Danzo, etc., etc. But yeah, we're going to put them all in the same position that Sasuke was in and see if they can run the gauntlet like he did with the little bit of assistance he got from White Zetsu.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and open up with Han and Roushi, and these two, there's not much known, but if you look at like their databook pages, there are some interesting notes, like Roshi's lava melts everything in creation, but the all in creation, right, that sort of rhetoric is only ever given as a descriptor for the Rinnegan, Shinra Tensei, and Bansho Tenin, fitting with how it actually was burning KCM1 Naruto whenever he was revived. And while many people may point to the idea of the Edo Jinchuriki being honed to their relational limit in regards to their Biju, Roushi was likely on the verge of, if not already being, a perfect Jinchuriki in some true sense. And I say that in quotations because such a term is never once stated and is a fan-made term, similarly to how V1 and V2 are fan-made terms used as titles for better communication amongst fans as sort of a reference point, right? And we know that the most common statement for perfect Jinchuriki would be Danzo stating that B and Yagura plus Madara and Hashirama are the 4 people who can perfectly wield such a level of power, which is interesting as not only are neither Madara nor Hashirama Jinchuriki, but Yagura wasn't, or at least he wasn't in the same sense that B was, as we know that he was held under Obito's Genjutsu for years, likely due to the pure fact that Yagura wanted a space and an escape from reality, as did Naruto, B, and Gaara by virtue of housing such a monster. This idea is kind of further pushed by B as well, as we blatantly know that Kurama states Yuki and B are in their relationship are a very special exception. They're not the normal. So the term that's usually attributed to perfect Jinchuriki almost certainly applies to Roushi and likely Han as well in terms of how they do work with Kokuo and Son Goku, which is nothing to be underestimated, as Son Goku, which I brought up in a last video, is called the king of sage monkeys, potentially placing him on a higher tier than Enma, who is merely the king of regular monkeys, which is a similar difference to sage toads, regular toads, which is pretty monstrous, seeing as Enma would be a fighter, not only relative to Hiruzen and a partner-like sense, but is also kind of capable of pushing out the Nine Tails a couple years prior, with Han being implied to be a rival to Roushi, both having been Iwagakure Jinchuriki and fighting together against Minato and Jiraiya, where Jiraiya considers it to be a really close call, if not for the FTG, in saving them from their Tail Beast bomb in their avatar state, something only characters capable of harnessing the Biju's power can use, supporting kind of what I said earlier about Roushi, maybe now Han as well, whose taijutsu is considered to be among the best in the world, which we did have translated for this. So these characters are certainly approaching the level of Kage, if not already being above, meaning that the earlier non-combatants in both C and Darui, characters like that, probably are just going to be done for. Also likely meaning that the version 1 Raikage won't be a too much for these two, but I know we kind of agree on where A truly scales. But do you want to go ahead and discuss how A might do with the Jinchuriki when he opens the fight up, maybe?
Yeah. So I think that with A, it's kind of weird because he's in this weird middle ground where a lot of people overrate him by a lot and think that he's actually on par with KCM1 Naruto, which is not the case. And then a lot of people underrate him. They think that he's just like absolute butt cheeks. So I think the best way to kind of scale him is to say, in terms of his physical combat speed, in particular with V2 Body Flicker, he's on the same tier as KCM1 Naruto, but in terms of his AP and durability, we can't actually get him there. So he scales below as an overall combatant, but at least somewhere in the ballpark in terms of speed. So that part of his arsenal is going to be really helpful here in being able to dodge the Bijou Bombs, but he's probably not going to be able to tank the Bijou Bomb. He's definitely not tanking 2 for the price of 1, getting that wombo combo. So for me, I think the best thing for him is if he starts in V1 and then goes up to V2 really quickly, he might be able to just kind of overpower them with physicals before they go into their transformation states. But if they go into those transformation states, he's kind of cooked. And the final thing I put here is, we know that A is just stated to be able to compete with the Eight Tails with pure physicals in terms of his taijutsu, but Han has that statement that says he's among the top in the shinobi world in terms of his taijutsu. So I think that they should at least be on a similar tier whenever Han is amping himself with the steam jutsu that he uses. So if they're on a similar tier in terms of taijutsu, even if he's slightly below, and then he can just kind of hang with him 1v1, you throw Roushi in there with his lava style, with his ability to go into the partial transformation, like Avatar Fire Bijou Bombs, and I think it's going to be a huge issue. Me personally, I think they're taking this most times out of 10, maybe 9 times out of 10,
Well,
outside of him just like V2 body flickering off rip.
I was going to jump in there and supplement what you said about them being comparable, even with Han, because KCM1 Naruto makes almost the exact same remark about their strikes in the war arc, so that does kind of just help what Sage was saying earlier about their AP. And no, I agree. I think A is one of those characters who's probably not quite as strong as people will have you believe, and I don't think his Sasuke performance is honestly all that great, which I do have a video detailing. On to Gaara, if you think that for whatever reason Gaara scales massively above A and would be out of Han and Roshi's pay grade, Kisame believes Deidara to be strong and remarks to Itachi about Roshi, and he's like nothing to laugh at in his prime, and he literally rebukes Itachi, which he almost never does, showing how Roshi is also pretty strong even by someone like Kisame's standards, who again is one of those characters who can fight B, who is honestly relative to A in those, more normal forms like V1, and if he's in V2, he's probably relative in V2, with A having a slight superiority. So you can use that as supplementary, although neither of us subscribe to Gaara being above A in that sense. Now, to survive the combo attack, because that's kind of what the whole Gaara situation is if they can survive Gaara, Tamari, Kankuro, and Darui's large-scale attack, as Sasuke did in his V2 Skeletal Susanoo. So, what could Han and Roshi do? Well, they have their 2 Jinchuriki avatars, right? And they could also just collapse the ceiling, as did Sasuke, but they could just use maybe tiny Bijou Bombs, or even Roshi's Molten Lava Ball Jutsu. He could just fire those out, and that would be pretty easy. If they do get hit, or if they get hit in the avatar form, maybe it knocks them out of their avatars. Roshi is essentially the first to actually get up and be ready after B's 8-tail twister attack, which is pretty impressive, showing how he does have pretty good survivability and endurance and a will to keep fighting. Like, these two are nothing to scoff at in their large-scale forms, and I think in those large-scale forms, if they were to enter these, or if they needed to collapse the ceiling and to get out of this to move on, I think they definitely could do that. And that kind of just leads on to how you think the intro to the next battle would go. But this is a section I don't think requires much time. I think they can obviously tank the attack and collapse the ceiling pretty casually. What do you think about that?
No, I totally agree. I also think it's worth noting, like, the comparison in durability between the Susanoo and that partial avatar transformation, or like avatar transformations in general. Like, usually from what we see, form to form, the Susanoo and the Kurama avatar at least have similar levels of durability and AP in terms of their striking and movement and stuff. So I would say that we can probably safely assume that that would apply to these guys here, even if their durability with the avatars is like slightly lower than some of the lower forms of the Susanoo. So for me, I don't really think that these guys are going to be able to do any real damage to them if they're in those forms. And also, because of that speed argument with with Han and A, it should be the case that at least with his steam, Han is faster than anybody else on the battlefield at that point in time. After A goes down, the Bijou bombs can obviously still be a gigantic issue, and we don't really see a lot of what they can do, but I would imagine that like Han's ability to, or Roshi's ability to use that lava style can come in handy in terms of like larger scale ninjutsu and such. But regardless, these guys just seem to be on a different tier than, the Sand siblings and Darwin characters like that. So I don't really see any issue with them clearing this fairly easily, especially when, as we stated before, Han should just be able to kind of handle A by himself more likely than not. So it's like you have an A plus combatant, and then you also have another perfect Jinchuriki, potentially, or nearly perfect Jinchuriki. I don't think these guys can handle that. So yeah, I think we move on to Mei in the hallway, which... Do you want to cover this one?
Yeah. I mean, I can go over it pretty quick. I think you could say they don't even have to go into their highest of forms or even their V2 forms, as they have higher forms below that, having the boil release amplification and the lava body respectively. And I'm not sure how the lava on lava would kind of interact, but you could say that at least Roshi won't be affected by the lava in a similar manner to how most people are. Even like the just the heat surrounding his body is like burning KCM1, stuff like that. And the only people to ever melt a Susanoo are Mei and Kaguya, but with Roshi's ability and the aforementioned statements surrounding it, it's probably not an exaggeration to apply him to this extremely remarkable group as well. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's Mei, right? And since we've established them to be above the other characters, I think saying they beat Mei is pretty simple, right? And for Oniki's going to have basically the similar case for most of these fights. As Oniki in the Summit, we don't know much about. We don't know if he has the Will of Stone amp stats as he does in the work. So is he above the V2 Raikage, who's lightened? We don't know. Is he still probably the strongest Kage? Yeah, probably, especially with particle style being included, and he's the only one of the 5 Kage, to put it in perspective, who almost one-shot Sasuke with one attack. He uses one attack, and he's the closest to killing Sasuke out of everybody in the summit. So it's not an exaggeration to say Oniki would be the strongest here, as I do think he probably is, but we just don't know what he can do. And so it's, can they just get out of the room and escape to chase down Danzo, as that was Sasuke's goal. It wasn't to stay and kill Oniki and all the Kage, it was just to hunt Danzo, but he had to run through this gauntlet. So we're just going to say they can escape to fight Danzo, just for the sake of discussion. And we can move on to Danzo unless you have anything else to add to these two more simple characters.
No, I think we can move on.
Yeah, and on to Danzo. Let's talk about Danzo a little bit, because we can talk about Danzo's power here and then lead him into the next section. So Danzo is taking on the role as a interim Hokage. And what does it mean to be Hokage? To be Hokage, it means to stand above not just the top of Konoha, but the top of the world as well. Stand atop each of the other Kage in a general sense. And while that might sound crazy about Danzo, right? You see A hitting Sasuke around. Well, look at this. Danzo's having to fight a Sasuke who is now so much stronger, he's stated to be nearly unrecognizable from the forms prior, where he was 2 amps and a full recharge above whenever he was relative to A. And despite this Danzo's reacting to his Amaterasu with his arms, damaging him, blowing out the back of the Susanoo and stuff like this. And while sure, Sasuke does kill him multiple times before Danzo can land certain attacks, that's just who Danzo is. That means, as with his abilities, he could be relative to Sasuke. So that's just kind of how that has to work, right? And so we also know that this would allow for Danzo to be arguably one of the hardest fighters, if not the hardest fighter, to take down in the summit. So as for how they would do it, honestly, since they're outside, it wouldn't surprise me if they just fully transformed. I think that's exactly what they're going to do. If not, at least go into the largest avatar they do prior to a full Biju transformation, where maybe Danzo might have some options like the Baku summon, who even Obito has like heard rumors about and its power and stuff like that. But quite literally, Sasuke just shot a fireball into its vacuum mouth and like one-shot it. So imagine what Roshi's like molten lava balls are gonna do, or if they fire a Bijou bomb down in it or something like that. So it's like, yeah, they're gonna just destroy the entire bridge. And their Bijou bombs are obviously going to be one-shotting Danzo, and all their basic attacks are going to be one-shotting Danzo in the Avatar. And it's like, is he going to be able to keep up? Because we know the Avatar would make them faster and more powerful beyond, presumably, their already higher forms of the Lava form and the Boil Release Amplification form. So is Danzo going to be able to keep up? Probably. I'd say he's probably slightly faster than the two, maybe relative to. Just depends on how high you scale the two. But we simply don't have much for Danzo to say he would really clear, unless you just don't think Han and Roshi are that impressive. So I do have Han and Roshi actually clearing this, surprisingly. But what do you have here? I say they win like maybe 6, 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the only problem would be if Danzo activates Izanagi first, but it's like, so we know in character, when they're fighting against powerful opponents together, they will go into the avatars and fire a double Bijou bomb combo at them. So if they begin the fight like that against Danzo, and like we're assuming they're going into it with the same goal of like killing Danzo, then I don't think there's anything he can do, because he can't really. I mean, I guess he could use the Izanagi once if he sacrifices the Kodo Eye, but then it's like, okay, maybe that allows for him to take down one of them, but both of them? So there are just way too many variables here that I think don't lean in Danzo's favor. Like, he has to get that gauntlet off to be able to activate the Izanagi with all of the eyes on his arm, and I just don't think he's going to get a chance to do that. So for me, I think it's fairly clear that he should lose, because it's just too much going on. But yeah, I mean, if you guys take a lower interpretation, then maybe you could argue it. But yeah, I think Han and Roshi are clearly above this guy together.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, after that, we have the Team Zetsu. Now, this sounds a little interesting, but it's essentially Black Zetsu, White Zetsu, the Guru, who will have a Yamato host body. Now, to start off, Zetsu isn't necessarily fodder, as many people think. Now, although he probably isn't soloing the entire Akatsuki or anything like that, neither are any of the 5 Kage, so it's crucial to note that just the swirly, more independent White Zetsu naturally scales above a Kid Obito whose body is beginning to feel more natural, which is key, as he could like previously combo attack relatively with one of the strongest Jonin in the world at the time, being Kid Kakashi. My boy Sage here to back me up on that, who basically didn't drop any bodies from what we see on the Mist front, yet when this Zetsu Obito joins, who's basically just Zetsu and then Obito's weak body under it, he's actually just blasting their organs out with wood style, cracking their faces with flying knees, you name it. Bro literally creates a lake of blood and trees of bodies. Like, bro, when he has adult Yamato's body, which we're going to give, obviously for the sake of discussion, as I just mentioned, he can rival all 5 Kage, who admittedly were fatigued, but were fighting with large-scale jutsu, as that's what Oniki credits to their fatigue against Guru. And Guru made it so that, like, the statue could even equal out an old man Hiruzen, who's much stronger than the one who could fight Orochimaru, the most evil and powerful of all village enemies at the time, arguably the strongest Sannin. So we know that, honestly, Guru might just bomb the summit and just go immediately into the Shinshu Senju and then kind of just solo the summit. So yeah, for individual matches here, I think neither me nor Sage have much to say. I think it's really clear that Zetsu is kind of a different beast. I think Zetsu is going to be absolutely mauling A, as like you might point to like base A in the war being able to cut one of the hands. That's great if there was only 2 hands. There's not. there's like 50 hands, and we could even presume that like maybe if he wasn't fighting, he would have more hands on top of that. Plus you have Black Zetsu who can combo attack and fight against relatively characters like Mei and stuff like that, right? And Mei is obviously a Kage who can react even superior to some of the Kage in the Madara fight. Like for example, when the Cater Wall's coming up, she's actually the first one to react prior to Tsunade jumping. She's also the one that reacts to the Majestic Destroyer Flame, shooting out 2 water styles, stuff like that. You guys get the point. Mei is actually kind of interesting for these battles, but it's like these characters kind of fought Zetsu, and it didn't go well. And now we're adding Black Zetsu, who's another Kage level combatant. So it's like, I don't even know if we gotta go into the individual matches. I think this is pretty favorable for Zetsu.
Like, and one important thing to note about Black Zetsu in particular is his ability to move underground super swiftly is, dude, massively underrated. Like, whenever Minato is trying to reseal Kurama into Naruto, like seal his part of Kurama into Naruto to save his life, Black Zetsu blitzes across the battlefield, comes up out of the ground, grabs the Nine-Tails chakra and like takes it, and then before Minato, one of the fastest characters in the world, can form a Rasengan and strike him with it, he dips back underground and goes all the way back to the other side of the battlefield. Also, he can just like take over basically any of their bodies. So like imagine if, you know, Guruguru Zetsu is like, he's got all their attention, and then Black Zetsu just like hops on Darui. You know what I mean? And he can take him way beyond his normal level. So it's like, I don't really think it should be that close.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just like, it's kind of a bitch match. It's like, I'm not saying we're putting one of the War Arc bosses here, but we're putting one of the War Arc bosses here. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no one's questioning this.
The final boss.
Like, I was even thinking, even the spores are also kind of cracked, just intel-wise and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's a bad look, right?
Yeah, draining their chakra.
Yeah, exactly. That was just about to say, he could split White Zetsu to drain their chakra, which did drain them in the summon. They were noticeably drained by it. And he can also just have them hide for intel's sake. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's Zetsu's definitely just going to be stomping the summit. The only one I could see giving a lot of problems is maybe, again, Oniki, but I don't see that being a big thing here. And I see them also just, what is Danzo going to do? You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, a dozen Izanagi, that's great. What's he doing, though? You know? So, yeah, after that, we have Kinkaku and Ginkaku, who are probably the 2 combatants most fitting to be running a gauntlet like this, seeing as, like, during the first war, they staged a coup d'etat, launching a surprise attack on both the second Kage and second Raikage at a peace meeting. So, now they're running the gauntlet in the future. Well, could they do that? Maybe. It really depends on... you know, okay, I'll say this. Okay, if your immediate answer to that is no, then you're probably misled, as the 2 brothers are kind of hailed multiple times, namely by A the Fourth, to be the worst criminals in Kumo Gakure history. Tsunade has no clue just how fearsome they are, and with the back of volume 56 elaborating that basically their enemies more fearsome than any Ino Shikacho could have ever imagined, despite them having already fought and beaten 2 Akatsuki members in Kakuzu and Hidan, each being fighters capable of taking on both Bijou and Jinchuriki alike, and we saw what the Bijou did in the last round, fitting with how the assassination of Kage is usually only other done through Akatsuki level characters. Sasori, you know, Orochimaru, you get the point, right? Yet despite this, in comparison to the same Kakuzu capable of creating natural disasters with his ninjutsu and fighting comparably with the strongest Jonin in all of Konoha and likely the world, who would be above the same guy stated to be stronger than Part 1 Kisame, both Kinkaku and Ginkaku are threats beyond what they possibly could have imagined, placing them almost in a separate tier to the zombie duo. You could even make the argument that perhaps Team 10 knew about the level of devastation created by Pain when he, you know, bombed the Leaf, and they're just beyond that. However, this is likely too much, at least for their base forms.
Bro, well, no, they, like... Shikamaru.
No, exactly. He was watching the whole fight. That's what I'm saying. Like, for their base forms, it's probably too much. But, you know, perhaps for their you know, transformed states, right? We also know that his transformation and presumably Ginkaku's as well. It's stated to be an authentic tail beast transformation, as the chapter 528 synopsis states as much. And this kind of goes into, say, his peak methods of scaling are essentially a matter of interpretation for how the cloak works, right? The first interpretation would be that in order to obtain the cloak, you simply have to reach a particularly threshold of QB chakra within the V2 cloak, and then it activates, and upon more chakra coming into play, the natural progression of tails begin to appear, right? The other interpretation would just be that the QB chakra is so powerful and unique, it actually requires a certain amount of chakra to reach a threshold, but the threshold isn't dependent upon the user and their reserves, but rather only the amount of QB chakra allocated, which upon reaching a certain threshold would then come forth in the form of 6 tails, making him relative to Kushina and Naruto's 6 tails form. And it's like, yeah, so Kinkaku's kind of a monster. He's obviously far beyond the Kage level threat, and I actually think he should just be boloing through A and these earlier rounds. And I think it really just comes down, like, the only one I really think could have trouble stopping him would be maybe the later Kage in Danzo. But what do you think about some of these earlier ones and then Danzo for Kinkaku and Ginkaku?
Yeah, I mean, I think they all get clapped. In terms of Danzo, maybe you could argue that he's able to get them, but like, if they're in the transformation states, he's screwed. He doesn't have a way to damage them. You know, like, he would have to seal them.
I was even,
but it's like, okay, is he?
I was gonna quickly say, it's not even as though he can outsmart them. They don't know what Izanagi is. Kinkaku can think. He's cognitively aware as a 6 tails Jinchuriki for the 9 tails, which is absolutely absurd. And it's because he doesn't have the big, fuck ass evil 9 tails inside of him that's just messing with his conscience. But it's like, do you understand what that could mean, though? It's like, okay, so if 6 tails Naruto could use Biju bombs, and then, obviously Kushina presumably could as well by virtue of having the 6 tails, could Kinkaku? Maybe. I don't see why not, all things considered. So it's like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty nuts if you say he can fire Biju bombs. And he's not like the 4 tails Naruto where he like can't move. He's literally just running around thinking and everything. So it's like, I think they're basically just going to be monsters that are just going to kill Danzo until Danzo's not there anymore. I do think there could be one option for Danzo, perhaps his ceiling for the reverse tetragram, maybe to like explode himself at the end, as Obito seems to have some fear about the reverse tetragram, at least for Sasuke's sake. But is base Sasuke's durability on par with V2 Kinkaku? Probably not. But yeah, I'd say they clear this, like, they clear the summit 7 out of 10 times. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't think they lose any more
Listen,
than
I was
once
being
or
nice.
twice out of 10. Like, it's bad.
After that, we have Hashirama and Tobirama whenever they're revived against Hiruzen. Now, this is a bit of a similar case where they are kind of just big bolo solo kind of guys, right? So, how strong are they? Well, it's kind of ambiguous, and me and Sage were talking about this prior. There's a couple ways to go with them, right? And actually, do you want to open up with your thoughts that you gave me prior to this talk?
Yeah, so, okay. Here's the thing. These guys are ambiguously below Hiruzen, but Hiruzen was the strongest dude in the world at the time whenever he was alive. So, it's like, alright, that's not even anything crazy, okay? Or at least the strongest dude that we knew of in part 1, right? So, being ambiguously below him isn't that insane. I think it's worth noting that we talked about they're going to be killable. They don't just have to be sealed. If they do just have to be sealed, then everyone's screwed. But with what they're capable of doing in terms of physically reacting to Hiruzen and, kind of boxing with him, and especially if you take the anime into account, which I don't think is canon, but like sometimes I guess you can use it as supplementary, they shouldn't have any issue physically scaling to anybody else here, but the large-scale ninjutsu they have is going to be a massive problem. They can absolutely just, like, destroy the entire summit, particularly Hashirama with wood style, trap them in giant wood constructs. I don't think anybody there is going to be able to match Tobirama's water style. Tobirama's water style matched Hiruzen's fire style, which is stated to be the strongest in the world. Now, obviously, elemental advantage, but it's like, okay, strongest in the world, right? So, I think that in terms of just their large-scale ninjutsu, that's going to be a massive problem. And then being able to physically deal with people on the level of the strongest guy in the world at the time in Hiruzen should allow for them to deal with any of them physically outside of maybe A. But then whenever you take into account like what we know about wood style and the chakra suppression properties of it, you can maybe argue that if Hashirama gets him with wood style, then the lightning cloak is just kind of gone. And then the massive scale ninjutsu they have, like picture basically 2 old man Hiruzens fighting the summit, except no Enma summon, essentially. Like that's basically what we'd be looking at here. So yeah, I personally think they kind of just steamroll through these guys, even if their scaling is a bit ambiguous.
Yeah, I agree. And you can use a couple of data book statements to support the jutsu you were referencing, right? So the Deep Forest Emergence, right? It's basically like, it can be used for attack, defense, building Konoha, capturing enemies, and it literally calls in all-powerful technique. The 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guy, which extends to the Kage Summit, calls it a heavenly gift of extraordinary power. Right, and it being an all-powerful technique would likely put it to be something relative to, or at least above, even Kakashi's Raikiri, which I think even in part 1 would probably pierce the cloak by virtue of Sasuke's Chidori being able to pierce the cloak. So it's like, is the cloak going to be enough to even stop the wood style? I'm not sure. And we talk about Tobirama's water style. You mentioned the anime. It's kind of a similar situation where Hiruzen looks way more impressive, but so do both Hashirama and Tobirama. In the anime, which the anime profile guides actually give a heading to, Tobirama has his water style, Water Shockwave, which is literally a tsunami that explodes on impact, as crazy as that sounds. So it's like, is he just going to be flooding the summit room with A? And it's like, yeah, probably. He's just going to be bowling through using the water dragon that he used against Hiruzen's mud wall, stuff like that. It's going to be pretty nasty. And then whenever you think about Bringer of Darkness coming out against one of the Kage or something like that, perhaps we go into... Yeah, perhaps we go to the May room, right? They're in the hallway, right? And they have, say, Hashirama's outside taking care of Oniki, which he might win, not even gonna lie. And Tobirama's fighting May, water on water. We have a pretty interesting battle, but it's like Tobirama might have the Bringer of Darkness. If you go with the manga, Hashirama has it, and it's like then Oniki's cooked. So one of them's cooked with the Bringer of Darkness for sure. And it's like, honestly, if so, I think Tobirama could just absolutely flood the hallway and then kill May through that, honestly speaking, which is pretty crazy, as he still should have access to most of the water style abilities that he would have had in his prime. The reason as to why I do state this is the second data book actually remarks that Tobirama took pride in his exceptional combative ability, but also in his water style, which in particular was revived against Hiruzen. So though his speed wasn't revived, though his strength wasn't revived, he held nothing back, but his water style was completely revived as it was in his prime, whenever the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide states that he used to flood battlefields, and he had the water lance that stayed to be able to pierce anything up to chapter 456, which is just prior to the summit. But other 10-year anniversary guides like Fanbook 2 that come out at the same time literally go through the summit to like the 470 range, which is like Sasuke's skeletal Susanoo and stuff like that. So that's really interesting, at least for the terms of what Tobirama is going to be one-shotting in the summit. And it really just comes down to like, yeah, these other lower end characters, they're not going to stack up. And if this sounds crazy, again, me and Sage alluded to how these characters are essentially Hokage level combatants. The Anbu who are watching the fight, they're like, yeah, so this is what it takes to be Hokage. And being Hokage means standing above each of these combatants. So it doesn't sound unreasonable. But if we move to the interim Hokage in Danzo, a 2v1 battle versus Danzo. Danzo states that he basically has never caught up to old man Hiruzen, right? And we both know that just means that they're both just ambiguously below Hiruzen. But to be honest, with the showings they had on Hiruzen being able to fully restrain him with the wood style and stuff like that prior to Enma coming around to save him, it's a pretty bad look, to be honest, right? So yeah, I would say that in all honesty, they should be able to just take down Danzo enough times. But there could be an interesting case to be made with Danzo's wind style, which we haven't really talked about, but his wind style is actually really strong. Like, for example, his wind style bullets are able to actually, pierce Sasuke's skin, stuff like that. In the anime, I believe Yamato's wood style, which would be below this Hashirama's wood style, can equal out those same bullets. So you also have a similar case for Hashirama's wood style in the Deep Forest Emergence, at least, if not something smaller, being able to do a similar thing though. So it's like, even though his wood style is pretty crazy, it's not anything crazy in comparison to the water style that Prime Tobirama had, or even this weakened sort of wood style. So I think they should actually win here more often than not. There could be another Bringer of Darkness, by the way.
But keep in mind where they're fighting. On a bridge, next to a gigantic body of water, with arguably the greatest water style user of all time.
Yeah, that's a good
so
point.
I think like the terrain advantage is gonna be insane. Like Tobirama's just gonna be like thrashing him with water style, and let's assume that he is able to get the gauntlet off before they just like beat him up. Because I mean, like we haven't really been including Fu and Torone in this, but I think all the people that we've had on here should just be able to like beat Fu and Torone. And so we're kind of assuming,
but I digress.
Yeah, absolutely. They're super strong, but just not in comparison to like the people that we've had on here, you know. But that being said, like let's assume that he is able to get the gauntlet off, and he is able to use the Izanagi. I think that Tobirama, being one of the smartest characters of all time, should be able to figure that out. He also, like, literally fought during the Warring States era when Izanagi was at its most prominent, so same with Hashirama. They would be aware of this and how it works, and so they'd probably be able to figure something out. I have no doubts in my mind. That the weird thing that we talked about earlier is like how this version of Tobirama never uses FTG, but you want to kind of go into like why that might be the case and why in this scenario it might be more prominent.
Yeah, so the reason as to why I personally don't think he uses FTG is because if you do pay attention closely to that fight, you'll realize that Orochimaru is the one weaving the signs for their jutsu. Now here, we're going to say that's not the case because, you know, Orochimaru's not here. So we're going to say they do have their own minds and they're going to be using stuff that they know. But the reason why I don't think Orochimaru ever uses FTG is because he doesn't know the seals for it. Because there are hand seals for FTG. And it's like, Minato's just really good at it and he doesn't have, but whenever he's a kid, he has to use seals for the jutsu. So it's like, would Orochimaru even know those seals? No. And so would he know the mental synapses for the FTG? No. So it's like, yeah, that's why the FTG probably doesn't come out. But more basic water style, like the Water Dragon, Water Wall, and the most basic wood style ability we know, Deep Forest Emergence, those are the jutsu that come out. And that's why I think the reason as to why is just because Orochimaru doesn't know them off the top of his head. But we're going to say they do. And while they don't have as much chakra, I can still see the FTG being kind of crucial. Maybe like a Flying Rising Slice just to kill Danzo one time. I also don't think the Baku, presuming it comes out, will be much trouble for them in all honesty. So yeah, I'd say they cleared the summit.
Like wood style GG.
Yeah. They're definitely clearing the summit pretty handily. After that, we have what we could call the anti-Jiraiya squad, which is essentially the 3 paths of pain that give Jiraiya the run for his money at the beginning of the fight. And it's probably important to open with, while yes, Jiraiya can fight them all one-on-one, with the chapter synopsis statement stating as much, he can't fight all 3. Now, he states to himself, if the fight goes on, he will die. And this is consistent if you look at how each one performs. Why does he say this? His strongest attack gets caught by the Preda path. His fastest attack gets reacted to by the animal path. And even whenever he just kicked the human path in the eyes and has a smoke bomb up behind his back, punch ready, the human path, with his eyes closed, can catch that punch. So this is why he thinks he's gonna die. Now, how strong is Jiraiya? Well, when Jiraiya first appears in Sage Mode, the chapter synopsis statement for him states that he, alongside Ma and Pa, are the strongest summon combo, placing them above Enma. Now, we know that Enma is the strongest animal summon, meaning that Sage Jiraiya is stronger than Hiruzen enough to make that degree to where they are now the strongest summon combo. Right, so we know he should scale above Hiruzen, which is just consistent with base Jiraiya being someone stated to be on par with Orochimaru with pain, even implying that Orochimaru and Jiraiya are relative in this very fight. So Jiraiya being a Hokage level combatant above Hiruzen, on par with Hiruzen, at least in Sage Mode, is pretty consistent. In base, the opponent he wants to fight the most, according to the data book, is the 3rd Hokage. So yeah, I'd say that Jiraiya is one of those characters who is kind of like the last match where he would be running the same gauntlet, scaling above each of them individually, but now we have 3 characters who each scale above that as a collective, or way above that. So how do you see this fight going? I see a lot of chameleons coming out, hiding in the mouths, stuff like that, kind of just blasting him around with larger jutsu, absorbing anything A has, absorbing the cloak off of him, having a soul steal maybe come into play. You know, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. The animal path by itself should be able to clear the first couple rounds. Like the ox, the chameleon, the bird, like, and gonna blow a hole through the ceiling, by the way, to get like an aerial advantage. Like, no question about that. Like, that just might be able to handle the first couple rounds. And then you throw in the fact that even the support jutsu that they might get from Darui and, you know, the Sand siblings, just gonna be absorbed. So that's gone. And then you also have this thing walking around that can just rip souls out of bodies. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't see what they could possibly do if, like, the human path hops in the chameleon and sneaks up behind A and rips his soul out. Or if, you know, the ox and the rhino and the bird and the replicating dogs all come out, like, they're just cooked. So yeah, I don't really see anything they could do here. And then, like, even that applies to everybody all the way through Danzo. Like, Danzo's going to have no answer for the replicating dogs. So, yeah, I don't really see a way that they win. I think that this just kind of would be a thrashing and not really all that close, not going to lie.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a pretty bad look in total for the Kage here against this pain. Yeah, do you have anything else to add in total today?
No, I mean, I think that, you know, it's cool coming on here and talking about some more underrated characters, people that are a little bit more niche, and providing a little bit of intel that I think a lot of people may not know. But yeah, if you are not subscribed for whatever reason, you're over 45, 50 minutes in. So what are you doing? Go ahead and like and subscribe. And then also come check out my stuff if you want to. But it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is, I don't know how long it'll be after I cut the audios, but this is definitely one of the longest videos I've done in a very long time. It was a commission video, guys. If you guys do want to commission your own video, if you have a topic you're really interested in, check my community tab. I have that over there if you want to learn more about that or interested in this. So, yeah, more importantly than all of that, may God bless you all. Love you guys.